Argentina is far more diverse than many people realize, but the myth that it is a white nation has persisted. As fans keep up with Argentina's success in this year's World Cup, a familiar question arises: why doesn't Argentina's team have more black players? In stark contrast to other South American countries such as Brazil, Argentina's soccer team pales in comparison in terms of its black representation. In 2014, observers hurled jokes about how even Germany's soccer team had at least one black player, while it appeared that Argentina had none during that year's World Cup final. 1% of the Argentinian population was black, according to a 2010 government census. While the number of black people cited was accurate, the percentage was actually far less than 1%, and the piece has been amended to state that. In 2010, Argentina's government released a census that noted 149,493 people, far less than 1% of the country, were black. During Argentina's colonial period, however, approximately 200,000 African captives disembarked on the Rio de la Plata's shores, and by the end of the 18th century, one-third of the population was black. Indeed, not only is the idea of Argentina as a white nation inaccurate, it clearly speaks to a longer history of black erasure at the heart of the country's self-definition. Argentines have several myths that purportedly explain the absence of black Argentines. Perhaps the first and most popular of those myths has been that black men were used as cannon fodder, resulting in a massive death toll during wars throughout the 19th century. Revolutionary armies, for example, conscripted enslaved people to fight in Argentina's Wars of Independence, 1810 to 1819, against Spanish forces, with the promise of freedom after serving for 5 years. Census data from Buenos Aires, Argentina's most populous city, reveal its African-descended population more than doubled in size from 1778 to 1836. Another myth argues that because of the high death toll of black men caused by the 19th century wars, black women in Argentina had no choice but to marry, cohabitate with, or form relationships with European men, leading to the disappearance of black people. But more recent studies have instead revealed that some black women in Argentina made concerted decisions to pass as white or Amerindian to obtain the benefits afforded by whiteness for their children and themselves. Taking advantage of various legal policies, some black women, such as Bernabela Antonia Villamonti, could be born into captivity and die not only free but labeled as a white woman. Other myths for the lack of black representation in Argentine culture have focused on the outbreak of disease, especially yellow fever in 1871. This, too, has been debunked, as data shows that outbreaks did not kill off the black population at higher rates than other populations. In reality, Argentina has been home to many black people for centuries, including enslaved people and their descendants, as well as immigrants. But white Argentine leaders such as Domingo Faustino Sarmiento, ex-president of Argentina, 1868 to 1844, crafted a different narrative to erase blackness because they equated modernity with whiteness. Argentina abolished slavery in most of the country in 1853 and in Buenos Aires in 1861. Argentina's landscape was soon transformed, as 4 million European immigrants answered the government's call to migrate between 1860 and 1914. As for the nation's black and Amerindian populations who were in Argentina before this mass European immigration, many began to strategically identify as white if they could pass, or to settle into more ambiguous racial and ethnic categories. Despite a history and its remnants that have sought to erase blackness from the nation, Argentina's black population remains, and more people of African descent have been migrating there. Today, Cape Verdean immigrants and their descendants number 12,000 to 15,000 and primarily live in the Buenos Aires area. This history makes clear that while Argentina's soccer team may not include people of African descent, or perhaps people that most would view as black, it is not a white team either. While Argentina has collapsed racial categories in its quest to be seen as a modern, white nation, the presence of people described as Morocco nods to this history of black and indigenous erasure. Various players on the team today are likely to be described as Moroccos in Argentina. Understanding Argentina's history reveals a country that is far more diverse than many people believe. It also points to the concerted efforts to erase and minimize blackness in attempts to create what many of the